Dawson. You couldn't beat a Dawson.
Yeah, yeah, the older cars are pretty good. Yeah, you could run them forever until they disintegrated. Okay, in terms of the stuff, deadlines remain unchangified. So exam 1, quizzes part 2, deadline October 19th, so a few weeks. Exam 2, quizzes part 3, November 16th. Exam 3, exam 4, quizzes part 4, December 7th, day that should live in infamy. The final deadline is at the end of the normal final time for the draft. Deadline November 9th. If you want to do a draft.
Could you go from the top because I'm in the
Oh, sorry. Exam 1, quizzes part 2, October 19th. Exam 2, quizzes part 3, November 16th. Exam 3, exam 4, quizzes part 4, December 7th. Exam 5 at the end of the normal final time. Paper, if you wish to do a draft, you can do as many as you can draft as long as you wish. Until November 9th, the draft time ends. +5 deadline for the base score +5, November 14th, turning through Blackboard, end of day. Emergency deadline for full credit, November 21st, end of day. And then the 50% desperation deadline, December 8th, end of day. There's some considerable confusion about the due date for the draft. I thought creating a YouTube video and writing it up in the guide would solve this, but YouTube, you failed me once again so many times. The difference between the draft and the deadline is, with the draft, that is the time if you want or really need to get a particular grade in class, that's a good time to have something done, just to ensure something's done. In terms of like when you would have to have a draft done, that would be November 9th.
What did you say? What was a good time?
Oh, the draft due date, I think, is today. But again, that was more, as I mentioned when I talked about it, that's like, because lots of papers are difficult, etc. Probably a good time to have something done, just to be sure you got something in progress.
About what time was that?
Today. But the deadline is November 9th. I mean, to use an analogy, it's kind of like, suppose you want to run a marathon, the Tallahassee Marathon. It'd be a good idea to start training that. Do you have to? No. All you got to do is run that marathon. But how well it goes depends on, and how soon you start training. And the drafts are kind of like training for the marathon. You do have the option of just, I'm going to do this, I'm going to jump on that start line. Yeah, just do it. See how that goes. Okay, anything else? Or any marathon metaphors?
You show me how to get from, like, when I'm on my computer at home, I'm trying to get to this, where, what's the man name?
Descartes?
Not Descartes, it's for quiz 2. Somebody. Some strange man that I don't know. One of them good dead friends.
Well, I have a lot of good dead friends.
But it's quiz number 10, I think it is. It's what is it? It's about who is he on? Quiz 10.
I don't know if the quizzes numbers, I don't know if they're memorized. Which it'd be well, quiz 10 would be in part 2, so it'd be one of these. Maybe Kant, possibly. Maybe Kant, maybe.
No.
Does anybody have their Blackboard up and see what? Anybody see what quiz 10 is about?
Quiz 10. Okay.
I have Blackboard here. What was the question for?
Oh, the question was, well, who's it about?
Oh, quiz 10. Yeah. It's about Berkeley.
Oh,
Berkeley.
yeah. He's further ahead in the notes. If you're
HDK. I was trying to go to him so I can start. These are a lot of quizzes due by the 19th.
Yep. But again, the best 10 count. So more is better, because you don't have to do them all, but the more you do, more chances you
The
get.
ones that you happen to maybe not do or not do as well on, they won't count.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that exam was weighs more. That's a big one.
Right. Yep. Berkeley's on page 46. It begins on 46 in the notes.
Do you have like an outline or like study after exam 1?
Oh yeah, I have the outline would be, the most general outline is the PowerPoint slides. If you go on Blackboard, there's a PowerPoint slide set for each of the 4 parts, and that's a general outline of all of it. Also, this, for the notes, this complete set of notes covering all the stuff, and that's on Blackboard as well. So in terms of level of detail, reading is most detailed, the notes second most detailed, and then the PowerPoint slides give you like a general outline. And anything that's in the notes can be on the exam, but a lot of stuff, as you see, the PowerPoints just hit the high points, so things could be on the exam that are on the PowerPoints because they're very chopped down versions of the outline from the notes.
10, it says 10A, so there's a 10B?
Oh, because what happened was the quiz, when I put the quiz up last year, one of the questions, there was a problem with the wording, and what I had to, when I put the quiz up, I couldn't put in quiz 10, because it wouldn't accept that, because there already was a quiz 10, I put it in 10. So it probably is just a 10. There may be a 10B in there as well. Okay, anything else? Okay, so turning back to our good dead friend Rene Descartes, who's French and super dead. As we saw, he brings forth the following methodology, which has infected part of philosophy ever since, which is taking from Plato the notion of rational intuition, where you see things by the light of natural reason. Also from your religious thinkers, the light of God. Now, Descartes ultimately, of course, believes that this light comes from God, but doesn't start off that way. So for him, there are truths whose truth you just see. Then what you do is you take those truths you just see and you plug them into deductive arguments. And if they're valid, as you're called from the ancient days of part 1, truths plugged into valid arguments, filling up all the premises, gives you a true conclusion, and then you can keep just punching those in. Or so we thought. Now, since we're not doing epistemology, we'll jump right to Meditation 5, where he gives his proof of God's existence. And we'll see more about our good dead friend Descartes, as well. But here's his version of the ontological argument. And here's how it goes. Premise 1. What he claims is that he has an idea of God, and this idea, according to this idea, within it, God has all the perfections. Now, which can be sort of shorthanded to God is perfect, but he's careful to note that he is, you may think, well, isn't that kind of weird, worded, like he possesses all the perfections. It'd be like saying someone possesses all the money. Same thing. I mean, it could be true, but kind of weird. But he does that, he means this, quite literally. Why? Because the perfections for him, in a shorthand, are like it'd be like a property, but of course it'd be a property, well, to perfection. It'd be the best of that category. Now a critical premise is this one, that existence itself is a kind of perfection, that it is a quality of things. Now if you combine those two, if you say, okay, God by definition, he's got everything. To use an analogy to like a burrito, he's like the ultimate burrito, the burrito that contains everything, even itself. Super burrito. Now when he claims, going with the burrito analogy, that existence, we'll go with this. Okay, God is like the burrito, and then everything, all the things that can be in a burrito, they're in there. And one of the things that's in, if you're looking over the counter, you would see like, salsa, guacamole, but you'd also see a little pan of existence, and that would go inside the burrito as an ingredient, to use the burrito metaphor. Now, he reasons like this. So, if the God you're thinking of didn't have existence, then he wouldn't be perfect. So going back to the burrito analogy, if he went, and said, I must have the perfect burrito. And if that existence was missing from the perfect burrito, it would no longer be the perfect burrito, because it would be missing that ingredient. So, if, he reasons, if you can have the idea of a perfect God, you must infer that existence is not only a property of God, but it's an essential property. In other words, he can't be God without that property. So if it's God, it's got that property, then that's, it doesn't follow that if it's got the property, it's God, but if it's God, it's got that property. It can't be God without it. Just like if you had to get the perfect burrito, if it was missing that ingredient, it would be a lesser burrito.
So he's saying God is God because he exists, or?
Oh, in part. The way what he's saying is, okay, let's take God, and let's have a list of ingredients, you know, that you gotta have to be God. If you don't, if you're missing these, you wouldn't be, you know, if you didn't have all these, you wouldn't be God. And so if you're God, you've got all these ingredients. Like with the, you know, again, imagine you're ordering the Gordito, the ultimate burrito, and it has all the, you know, there's a list of all the things it has to have. Now, if it doesn't have one of those ingredients, it's no longer the Godrito, it's a lesser.
And these, like, qualities or ingredients, they're based on what we have as humans, since we're like a lesser, or we're made in his image? Or?
Yeah, because we would have these qualities, like, we would exist to a lesser degree, we would have God's, because he's gonna one perfectly.
Yeah.
Now, when he claims this is gonna be an essential quality, again, essential qualities are, if you lose it, you're not that anymore. So, if it is God, he has to have all his essential properties, otherwise it wouldn't be God. You know, to go with the triangle metaphor. If you're a triangle, you gotta have three sides. If you don't have three sides, you're not a triangle anymore. So as if you're God, you've got to exist, and if you didn't exist, you wouldn't be God. So if existence is an essential property, he's got to exist. Why? Well, being three-sided is essential to a triangle, so triangles must have three sides. And if God's, you know, existence is an essential property, if you're God, then you exist, then God must exist.
Question, how was he saying that God does exist? What was he saying, like, how was he saying that God exists?
You mean like, in what manner he exists, or?
Yeah, I guess that proves.
Oh, yeah, because he's trying to say, he's trying to prove, this is an attempt to prove it by pure reason. That since God is perfect, he's got to exist, because he'd have to have existence in his ingredients. Again, going back to the burrito metaphor, if in order to have the Godrito, it must have all these ingredients. If one is missing, it is not the Godrito. So if something is the Godrito, it must have all the ingredients. So if you get a Godrito, it has all those ingredients. And if one of those ingredients is existence, that means the Godrito must exist. It can't not exist.
So how do you separate the gods either from the other person?
Oh, there is only one. There is only one God for him.
Yeah,
So the burrito. That's
burritos have, they exist, so how did he separate it?
Oh, we'd be lesser creatures.
The lesser burrito.
Yeah, we exist, but we don't have to. So any one of us could not exist. This only applies, I mean, like with Anselm, this only applies to God.
So, is there a list of universally accepted perfections? Or did he just self-proclaim existence as a perfection?
He essentially claims it as a perfection. I mean, there probably is, like, there's not like a complete list, because you have to, you know, the view is that God can have qualities we're unaware of, but the usual ones would be like all good, all powerful, all knowing, and then any quality we have that's a positive quality, like intellect, you know, justice, kindness, mercy, God would have that to perfection. So any quality we could have that would be a good quality, he's got that perfectly, and there are probably other qualities that we're unaware of because we're, you know, we're not perfect beings that he might have that we're not aware of because we're perfect. Now, going back to your question, like, what about, you know, all the other burritos? Why can there only be one Godrito and one God? Well, here's his claim. Nothing else has existence as part of its essence. Why? Well, he claims every other being, we can have a conception of it without it actually existing. So if you take going back to like a list of definitions, if you have the definition of anything else other than God, existence won't be part of that definition. For example, take like a, well, something as simple as like a folder. A folder is what?
Folds.
Yeah, folds.
Yeah.
It folds and holds.
Storage.
Yeah, for storage. And you can list all the qualities of the folder, but essential to its definition is not that it exists. Or maybe a better example would be like my infamous billigon. It's a figure, we have a definition, a figure with a billion sides. But of course, it's not part of its definition that it exists. Is there such a thing? Maybe.
So you're saying existence cannot unexist, but everything else, even though it exists, it cannot exist.
Right, because for us, like think of like the lesser burritos.
We can die.
Yeah, the God Rito, none of its ingredients can be different. Because if any ingredient was different, it wouldn't be God Rito. But we're like lesser burritos, where we have a list of ingredients, but existence is not on that list. We may exist, but we don't have to. Because it'd be like optional. You could have, like if you order the God Rito, it has to have everything, or it's not the God Rito. But with lesser burritos, you could order them and say, okay, to hold the existence, crudely put. Although we really can't, because it's got, and that kind of points to the problem.
How would we define existence? Like, is existence being alive? Is it being known of?
Oh, just being, existence would just be, it is. So for Descartes, physical objects would be, it occupies time and space, and for mental substances, it would be that they are thinking. So, you know, the normal, kind of the normal sense, it is, it's real, it's here. Yeah, you wouldn't have to necessarily know it, or something could be dead and still, obviously it's still, that, the park could still exist. Now, so, also much like in St. Anselm, in addition to claiming God exists, God must exist, it only applies to God, he claims you can't even deny God's existence. Why? Well, he claims to be a contradiction. Going back to the example of the triangle, if someone says triangles aren't three-sided, they'd be saying a three-sided figure is not three-sided, which would be a contradiction. So, of God to say the being that must exist doesn't exist would be a contradiction. So he claims you cannot even deny it. So he does, the three-fer that Anselm did. God exists, God must exist, this only applies, it only applies to God, and he can't even deny it.
I'm just trying to figure out how is he confirming his existence, God's existence, but also how is
Pure
he
reason.
denying it?
He thinks about pure reason. If you just think about, like, how do you know like triangles have three sides? Well, definition of triangle. Triangle by definition, three sides.
So he's taking the definition of God
Yeah.
and that.
Yeah, because if God by definition is perfect, and perfect means you gotta have
a
everything.
certain list of qualities.
Yeah, you gotta have everything that's good.
He's saying like where perfect will come from, just having that understanding of what perfect
Yeah.
is, that's how you know that.
Yeah,
there's
'cause it-
consistency, okay.
Yeah, because he claims if you understood, what it is to be perfect,
Yeah.
you would know that on that list of qualities, there would be existence. And he claims that God has got to have that, or we wouldn't be perfect. We're imperfect, so we don't have to exist.
Or what we do is
We luckily, or unluckily, depending on the person, we do exist. So Descartes was pretty stoked about proving God's existence with that method, which of course leads to our good dead friend Immanuel Kant. And no, I won't do any, Kant jokes. A little background for Kant. He was a guy, wrote some stuff, and then died. He was super punctual. So sort of an anecdote about him was he used to walk, the philosopher's walk. And you can go to where Kant used to live, and you can walk that philosopher's walk, still there today. And one day he didn't show up on he was so punctual about it, he'd do it at the same time every day, the locals could set their watches and clocks by it. And one day he did not appear. So they ran to his house worried that something terrible had happened to him. But they found that he was so engrossed in a book that he'd forgotten to take his walk. And so he promised them he would never miss his walk again. And so to this day, the ghost of Kant walks. Now that part's not true, but it'd be a good story. So it is true, it's better than true. Now, he contributed a great deal to stuff. In addition to his work in philosophy, he also did work in other areas like geometry and apparently anthropology and other stuff too. Pretty smart guy, and he died. So what was Kant up to? Well, one thing that kind of provoked him was our good dead friend Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who was a German rationalist, and he, kind of was educated in that tradition. But he ultimately ends up rejecting both classical rationalism and also classical empiricism. So he made many assumptions. One of the critical assumptions he made was that Aristotle's logic was the final word on logic, which was wrong, and then Newtonian physics was the final word on physics, which was wrong. But at the time, it seemed like a good idea. But then, of course, we saw many more advances in logic, and of course, many more advances in physics. But Aristotle's logic is still good, and Newtonian physics still works. So it's not like he, was embracing like some crazy, super crazy, stuff like phlogiston or seances or something. So what was he trying to do? Well, most of the big thinkers during this time period were trying to do two things. One, science. The view was, what kind of got this Renaissance and life rolling, was the idea that although people have been sciencing and philosophizing, things were like, again, to be a mess. It's kind of like when you live someplace a long time, it starts getting all like, you go and you're acting like, holy crap. You just realize one day, where did all this stuff come from? Why is this crap all still here? Or if you do a breakup, then you're like, why is this person's crap still here? Then it's easier to solve. You just throw it all onto the street. Raccoons take care of it. Or eBay, also good. Or Goodwill. If you want to be like that. Yeah, turn it exactly.
Sold your stuff on eBay.
Yeah. So, first goal here is clarify the foundations of science. So the concern was, science gotten all messy. It's just it's like to use Leibniz's metaphor, it's like a shop that's all just full of all this stuff. You gotta organize and clarify. Same project as Descartes. So the idea was, if you sorted this stuff out, then you could start building a solid science. Now, like the empiricist, he believed that experience had a critical role here. So Kant, in a way, creates kind of like a hybrid approach, because he takes what he likes from the rationalist and what he likes from the empiricist, and then rejects the stuff he doesn't like, which is kind of the way stuff is done. Goal 2. During the time period Kant was Kanting, science was big, big upswing from the time of Galileo and Newton and so forth, but religion was also still really big. Thinkers like Galileo, Newton, very devoted to religion. They were very religious thinkers, in addition to their scientific thinking, very religious. And so you have this challenge of how do you reconcile science, which he really liked, with religion. And of course he also wanted to keep morality and freedom. So how do you reconcile, God, freedom, and morality with the new science? And of course, the science that's being developed at this time obviously becomes like the science we have today, and it's very materialistic, very deterministic, and doesn't include God, because the more science grows, the less it is for God. And so it's still the challenge of people face today. People who believe in morality and freedom and God, but also want to science the sciences. The challenge is, how do you make those work? Thirdly, when he was doing this stuff, metaphysics was in a crisis, because his predecessor, someone we'll see in the future, ironically enough, David Hume, claimed that metaphysics was just crap. If you get a book and you got metaphysics in it, just throw that sucker in the fire. Although he didn't really believe it, because he wrote metaphysics, it wasn't really for book burning. But the idea was that people had been working on metaphysics for so long, and nothing had been solved. And so the idea was that, this is just a mess. Now Kant said, yeah, there's a big problem in metaphysics. He used the metaphor of, we're going along a darkened coast with no lighthouses, and no lights, no radar, because predates radar. But he says you should no more throw out metaphysics because it's been crappy theories than you would stop breathing just because there's some bad air. So he thinks he can solve the problem of metaphysics. And then he does, possibly killing by metaphysics. Now, he took himself as being part of the tradition of critical philosophy, and he wrote critiques, like critique of pure reason and critique of practical reason, and some other books, like the books as well. He wrote a lot of stuff. If you read his stuff, you'll find it really super difficult. I remember in grad school, we were in one of my ethics classes, another grad student, Ed, he showed me, he says, look at this. I'm like, what? He says, see this entire page? It's one sentence. And I'm like, what? And it wasn't a small one, it was a big book, and it was going, just like, semicolon, 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 colon. Yep. The entire page is one sentence. It is really long. Now, Kant, though, is not the most confusing of philosophers, because if you have people like Heidegger and Hegel, just no. But anyways, it was like they were in a contest. It was like, I'm super confusing. And then Hegel's like, hold my beer. And Heidegger's like, hold my schnapps. I'll top this off. So why is Kant famous? Well, one reason is because a lot of people do Kant as he's their philosopher, and they say that you can divide philosophy to pre-Kant and post-Kant, and of course they're just trying to get jobs. So what's his real claim to fame? Well, one claim to fame is this. He created his own Copernican Revolution. Now, the original Copernican Revolution was what?
Who created Kant?
Oh, no, Copernicus, who's also super dead. So what did Copernicus, what's he known for?
He established that the sun was the center of the universe instead of the earth.
Yeah, exactly. He went from a geocentric view, put forward by Aristotle and others, that everything revolved around us, which wasn't stupid. From our perspective, everything does, the sun seems to, we still talk like that, the sun rises. It's right, the earth is rotating. It doesn't seem like that. And then to switch to a heliocentric, which is that the sun is the center of the solar system. So Copernicus revolutionized it. Now what Kant did was this. Now, if you remember our good dead friends Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle, their view was that what we did was this. I'll use Aquinas. Aquinas' view is you got God, and God is an idea of, say, like cat, or in Spanish, el gato, or el gato. And so God is the idea of cats, and he's got like the prototype cat in his mind, and then he creates cats. Lots of them. Get that cat a tail. And then we see them, and what we do is we see lots of cats, and then we form the idea of the form of cat, which is of course not going to be perfect because we lack God. God is like the perfect, because his mind is infinitely powerful. He has the perfect idea. I mean, to use an obvious analogy, think of like a file for a 3D printer, perfectly defining, on the molecular level, a cat. Obviously, we can't store that in our mind. And then what we can store apart, we get like an idea of it. So this is like the perfect idea of cat. God makes actual cats. We see cats. We get idea of cat. And so that's how we get the forms. So how then does like morality and stuff work? Well, in the case of morality, Aquinas believed, and also Aristotle, that we looked at the way, God is the ideas of morality, creates the world that way. So good and evil are out there so we get the ideas coming into our mind, and that's how it works. It's out here, empirically we see it, we get the ideas, the concepts. Now what Kant does, he claims, and I'll focus on the example of morality, he claims that's not how it works. Morality, not out there in the world, so where is it? Well, here's his revolution. He claims that the concepts in morality, you know, use an example of morality, all of the notions of good and evil are in there. Also with concepts, as we'll see, like space and time, that's all in there. So on Aquinas' view, we get our idea of, say, space by seeing space. Then we get the idea of space. We get our idea of time by, like, time passing, and then we get that concept. So what's out here gets into the senses, and then the mind fills up.
So how we get the concept of God?
Well, for Aquinas, we saw it. We observe things, and then we apply reasoning. We see like stuff move, and we say, aha, there must be God. We see like design, infer there must be the designer, so we infer God.
Everything is inferred.
Yeah. Yeah, ultimately. We don't actually, well, Aquinas says, you know, he actually addresses the question, like, how do we know about God? And we only know God directly when we're dead, because living creatures cannot bear, you know, don't encounter God. Probably can't bear them, you know, could not exist in his presence. He's so, you know, super awesome. Now, what Kant does is he reverses this. So, morality is not out there in the world. Morality is in our mind. Space and time are not out there in the world. Space and time concepts are in our mind.
So, if you say we created these things ourselves, like they're fashions of like human thought and stuff like that, or what's it?
Yes, but then, you know, kind of the next logical step would seem to be, well, isn't it all just relative or subjective? Because normally we think if something's just in your mind, like beauty in the eye of the beholder, that it's all just relative and subjective. There's no objective morality. There's no objective morality. But Kant basically sticks a fork in that light socket and short circuits it, because he says that all human beings have, unless they're like insane or something, or geniuses, they all have the same structures of the mind. So the same moral systems is in everybody, the same concept of time, the same concept of space. Now, to use an analogy, think about color. Oh, an analogy. Think about color. Now, science has told us, of course, color lives where? Yeah, in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
But assuming, you know, someone's got the, you know, fully functional, you know, perceptual mechanisms that are colorblind, everyone sees the same color, we assume. And so color on one hand is all in our mind, but we also think color is objective, that people can be wrong about the color of something. And so for Kant, you know, crudely put, morality works the same way. Morality is not out there in the world. Morality is in your mind, just like color. But we all have the same, you know, except for people who've got like a moral defect, we have the same structure. And so we all, according to Kant, if we're thinking rationally, we would see things the same way. Now, we're imperfect beings, of course, so people get things, you know, wrong. But he thinks we have all the same concepts built in there. So all that stuff's in our mind, but we all have the same stuff, with some notable crazy exceptions.
So would he be saying that people are innately good because, you know, you have this predisposed concept of morality?
Oh, actually no, because he would say that yeah, because good question. He does not think that we are, doesn't seem to think we're innately good, but he thinks if we reason properly, we're not like defective or damaged or just willfully ignorant, he claims we would all come to the same conclusions. That that through reason, we'd be able to figure out what is, and he has a thing, if you take the ethics class, he has a thing called the categorical imperative. And he believed that you could use his moral tool, the categorical imperative, and sort out what, in any situation, what is good and what is bad. Now you could still screw it up, you know, just like, but to use an analogy, if someone knows, if you give someone a formula for figuring something out, like calculating angles or figuring out like how much calories they should eat or something, as long as you do all the math correctly, you'll get it get it right. But of course, people can still screw things up. So he revolutionizes things by saying that all the concepts are on the inside, and we put them onto the world.
I think that makes more sense.
Well, yeah, it's kind of infected modern science in a way. Well, you know,
So, but he's not the one that's saying that we really don't exist. It's just that,
oh no, he never denies that he's pretty conventional that way. Yeah, he says you exist, I exist, he thinks God exists.
it was just, our perception is in the mind.
Well, he thinks they're concepts. I mean, to use a metaphor, this projection's not on this, the projection is being projected. So it's not out there. If I turn on the projector, it disappears. Now the screen is real. To use a metaphor, Kant would say, yeah, the screen is real, but what we project on it to divide it up is in our minds. But he claims it's still objectively real because it's true that it's in our minds, and if we're functioning rationally, we all have the same stuff, like a color. Like your shirt is purple, and everyone who has functioning eyes and normal cognitive color processing, everyone would say, yeah, that shirt is purple, objectively so.
But to say that is not cast up there, I don't see the rationalization of that.
Well, his idea would be the world, maybe a better metaphor would be this. Think of the United States. Think of like a geographic map of the U.S. Now, the U.S., of course, is divided into what? 50
states.
Yeah. But if you're walking along outside of a Bugs Bunny cartoon, is there an actual line painted on the ground? No, those divisions aren't, in a way, real. They exist just in our minds. We put them onto the world. And so in a way, for Kant, the division of the states is kind of like this, it exists in our mind. Now the difference would be, imagine if the idea of the states was built into everybody's minds. So everyone, they would actually see the lines. And everybody was like that. So everyone would say, yeah, there are 50 states and every human had that. Well, in a way, that would be objectively real in a way because everyone would see it. So again, it's objective in kind of a weird way. Now Kant does include, as we'll see in the future, the possibility of beings, this is kind of sci-fi, that would have radically different mental capabilities. That they would see, their concepts would be totally different from ours, and so their experiences would be radically different. Well, again, he uses God as an example of a being that would be radically different from us. So in a way, it's objective, but also you could say, well, ultimately it would be kind of relative because if species were radically different enough, each one would have its own sort of perceived reality. But he does ultimately claim, as we'll see in the future, that there is still a, real. Now, Kant. I need my sheet to get all the judgments right.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, thinking about kids and the clean slate idea, they really only wanted the innate desire, for food, water, shelter, and then from that point on, we teach them all of these concepts of what is right and what is wrong. So then that work against the line right here where you said in your notes, but though all our knowledge begins with experience, it does not follow that it all arises out of experience. So would his idea still follow in light of that we teach children the concept of what is right and what is wrong?
Yeah, well, because Kant would say, given his view, that you could teach children the wrong stuff. So he believes that there is his system, what he calls a categorical comparative, and he thinks the rule basically is this. Crudely put, if you want to do something and you can rationally will that everyone else could do it too, then it morally passes the test. And so for Kant, people would teach their kids all kinds of terrible stuff, but he would still say that they could be wrong. And he thinks that built into us, so sort of like the rationalist, he thinks built into us are in the structure of our mind are all these concepts like space, time, and in the categorical imperative, somehow.
And so that's how we know that things like sexism and misogyny and racism, like that's how we know all these things are wrong, because it's like.
Yeah, because Kant would say you could know objectively by applying his ethics, and he thinks if you apply it, and the result is, and you're thinking rationally and non-crazily and unbiased, that the result that comes out would probably be right. I mean, he leaves out, since we're imperfect, he leaves out the possibility you could get things wrong. But he'd say if you're doing everything, doing all the calculus the right way, then you would get the probably correct answer. Now, a critical part of Kant's thing, in addition to the Copernican Revolution, the reality thing, because one of the things, is reality just like subjective? You raise the question, is this real? Kant doesn't say that our minds create reality, that we're living in, that we are literally creating it. And he doesn't claim that, he doesn't accept idealism, so he doesn't think it's just minds, just, and nothing else. So he believes what happens is this. There's reality out there, and as we'll see in the future, he calls this, the reality, the noumena. That's the real stuff. What's that like? Well, we can't have any idea of that, because what we have to do is we have data flying in through our senses. That's the empirical part. But what we do is, without even being aware of it, our mind automatically starts processing the data, using our, all the concepts that we have in there, and then it just delivers to our consciousness automatically already processed results. For example, when you look through the room, our mind is automatically categorizing, like we get all the data flying in, and our mind is automatically, classifying things, desk, human, laptop, chair, bottle of water, organizing all this stuff. So what we experience is an amalgamation. It's the raw data coming in, processed by our concepts, our categories. So there's no way we can compare reality, the real stuff, with our experience, because we can never get outside of our experience. Because no matter what we do, we're still experiencing our experience. So we can never say for sure what is. Kant totally believes in a real world. So if you said to Kant, is there a real world? Well, he didn't say anything because he's dead now, but he would have said, yeah, there's the noumena, there's the really real for real. The stuff that science points to. But what is it really, really like? Well, it's probably something like we experience, through our processing, because otherwise, we'd just be insane or something, or maybe we are. But we don't know for sure what it's like. And we do get I mentioned, it's kind of sciencey, because what science tells us is that the world out there doesn't have, color, taste, and that what's happening is there are, super fast moving electrons, protons, and neutrons spinning around rapidly. Photons are striking them, bouncing off, hitting our. Yeah, we're made of photons and neutrons and electrons, so it's all these subatomic particles whacking into each other. And so what would that really look like in the mind of God? Well, God, who knows? So what's out there is totally different from our actual lived experience. Because our experience tells us this is a solid object, my hand's a solid object, but science tells us it's mostly empty space. It's just whirling particles, and that we somehow experience them as, a body and tables and, chairs. So the world we experience, even our own science tells us that that's not what's out there. Even though we experience, this. Yeah.
So it's all a matter of perception.
Yeah, because our mind is processing it for us. It's taking what's ever out there and turning it into what we got. And again, today that's what science tells us. This stuff comes flying in, and we process it. And we know that other creatures, like bumblebees and bats and stuff, they have different perceptual ranges. So a bee would see this room quite differently. A creature that can see into the infrared or ultraviolet would see things like some animals can do, insects, they would have a different experience than we do. And so we try to capture some of this in video games, or movies, like The Predator, you know, that type of deal. And so we can imagine beings that would have very different perceptual capabilities.
So what you see may not be what I see.
And that's a problem, yeah, because one thing that people raise then is, how do you know what you're experiencing is like, you know, like the case of color. And people raise the question of color, like, I'm seeing a particular color, you're seeing a color, but are we seeing the same color?
So
We
how
will
would
never.
that relate to like the passing of time, like how one person, like two people are in the same situation, but one person feels like time is taking forever to pass, but the other person is enjoying it, so it's like it goes by quicker?
Yeah, because Kant believes, saying, you know, he thinks time is a category of the mind, so there's not external objective time. And so, yeah, you could have a different experience of time from someone, and we do, you know, because we talk about like time flying when you're having fun, or time dragging when you're bored, and so your experience of time would be, and everyone's experienced this, you feel like time is slowing down or speeding up.
So, is it like, so it'd be relative, right?
Well, in that case, we all experience time, but we can experience it in different, so Kant would say, yeah, we all understand that, you know, we all understand that idea of time passing faster and slower, and depending on how like things are happening to you, you feel it being slower or faster, but it's still in a way objective, because we all have the same concept of time, even though we may experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Time is the same, even though your thought pattern causes you to experience it.
Yeah, slower.
Yeah.
Yeah, faster.
So time is constant, it's just,
Yeah, Kant would say we all have the concept of time, but our experience of it may be, you know, to use an analogy like with, you know, kind of like with color, you know, like whether you find a color pleasing or non-pleasing relative to you, but of course we would have presumably the same concepts of color, supposedly. But as you said, you raise a point that maybe we don't. Maybe, you know, if I could somehow see your perceptions that are look, you know, weirdly different, the colors would be way off.
This is what's interesting, right? You're saying that there's this philosopher now, his name's KRS-One, and he was saying that like a painter and like a firefighter, they come in the room and both of them view it a little differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, firefighters will look at something that's a fire hazard, painters gonna be like, oh, like that's a really.
Also a fire hazard. Until we painted. Yeah, I mean, Kant would of course accept that people focus on different things, but his claim would be, which maybe just, you know, other philosophers disagree with, is that the basic concepts would all be. So if you ask the, you know, firefighter, painter, is this like a spatial room in which time passes? They would say, what a weird question, but they'd probably say, yes. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the stuff for today. Friday, of course,